Yoga Philosophy for Everyday Living, a podcast to bring the ancient wisdom of yoga to inform your everyday living on and off the mat. Hi, I am your host, Monica Phillips. So often we sabotage ourselves because of the chatter in our heads. This podcast will take you through the 8 limbs of yoga with leading yoga instructors and introduce you to executives who have brought yoga into their lives so they can thrive. Please listen, subscribe, and share it with a friend. Welcome to Yoga Philosophy for Everyday Living. I'm really excited to be here with Bhide today. Samir is the author of One Fine Day, Overcoming Adversity and Embracing the New Normal with Grace and Gratitude. And he has certainly done that. Welcome to the show, Samir.
Thanks for having me on the podcast, Monica. Really appreciate it.
It's so great to see you again. We are old friends. I met Samir in Washington, D.C. back in 2010, so 11 years ago. Before January 31st, 2017, his life was pretty good. He moved to the U.S. from India in 1990, and you had already completed an accounting degree, and then you moved to the States and completed a management degree and then your MBA in 1993. You had a career in consulting and technology, which is when I met you. You were married and have 2 boys, and then you settled outside of Washington, D.C. And then that day in January, just as you were beginning your work from home, you suffered a catastrophic stroke in the cerebellum. And you required 2 brain surgeries and spent the next month in a medically induced coma before you could even transition to the path of recovery. That sounds like a lot, like a huge life change that most people never expect. And you talked about this when you shared what is yoga. It's this struggle that we have in life so often comes from what we expect and what we want our life to be and where we are now. So what happened that day? When did you realize what had happened that day?
Monica, I had no idea because I had no symptoms before. So there are 2 types of strokes, apparently. I only found that out after I had one. So there are 2 types of strokes. One is a lifestyle stroke because of your eating, not exercising, drinking, and stuff like that. And the other one is a genetic kind of stroke. You're born with some condition that it will eventually happen to you. And so I was in that category. It was a genetic kind of stroke. I was born with this condition, and this stroke would have happened when I was 10 or 20 or 30 or whatever. It just happened when I was 47, almost 4 years ago. So I had no symptoms whatsoever. In fact, 15 days before the day I had my stroke, I had done a complete physical, and everything was fine. And obviously, they don't do an MRI because unless there are some symptoms, they don't do that. This is January 31st, 2017. So that morning, I got up, I started to do emails, and then all of a sudden, my left sinus started to hurt right below my left eye, and it was really throbbing. And then I started to get dizzy. I couldn't sit straight on the bed. So I just decided to lie down. And then I started to sweat. And as soon as I started to sweat, I knew something was wrong. And my ex-wife, she also knew something was wrong because having the 3 symptoms, the severe throbbing pain in the sinus, dizziness, and swelling, we thought that I'm having a heart attack or something like that because that runs in my family. And as soon as I started to sweat, my ex-wife called the paramedics, and they came within 15-20 minutes. And when they came up, they couldn't figure out what the heck was happening because in these types of strokes, your vitals are normal. So my EKG was normal, my blood pressure was normal, and so on and so forth. So they had no idea what was going on. They thought that I am having a severe migraine headache. And lucky for me, they decided to take me to the hospital. And they got me down to the ambulance, and then I passed out. And I don't remember the next 30 days because I was in a medically induced coma. So that saved my life. I think they came within 15-20 minutes. And then within the hour, I was on the operating table. And that probably saved my life because time is of the essence in strokes. So apparently when I reached the ER, even the doctors there had no idea what was going on because, again, the vitals were normal. And apparently I told them that I feel like the left hand is floating in the air. And as soon as they heard that, they rushed me to emergency MRI. And then they found out that a blood vessel had burst in my cerebellum. Then they rushed me to the surgery. I went through a 3-hour surgery. Then I spent about 30 days in a medically induced coma. I have no recollection of those 30 days. barring a few instances which I've noted in the book. And then after 30 days, they shifted me to a rehab hospital where I started doing all kinds of therapies. And that's when I regained my consciousness.
Tell us about what you're on now, still, is this road to recovery.
Being a business person, I kept metrics of my recovery. So there were three things which I looked at: the strength of my body, because my left side was completely paralyzed after the stroke. My vision was affected. I had severe case of something called a nystagmus, which affects balance and depth and perception and so on and so forth. So that was the second. And the third one was dizziness. So the strength has improved 60-70% since my stroke. Vision has improved 60-70% since my stroke. But my dizziness has not improved at all because the stroke was on the cerebellum and that affects all your motor skills. And that's where all the motor skills and the dizziness and stuff. And my headaches have not improved. So that's what I'm facing today. And that's my new normal, the way I look at it, because it's not improved at all. And I may have to live with this for the rest of my life.
So you're from India, but you had been living in Washington, D.C., in the D.C. area. What caused you to move back to India for treatment?
After my stroke, after those 30 days in the induced coma, I spent 30 days in the rehab hospital where I started doing all kinds of therapies, right? Physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, and so on and so forth. And my left side was paralyzed. I had completely become weak, and my speech was a little bit slurred. So, I started doing those therapies, and then I came home after 30 days in the rehab hospital. And then we started continuing to do outpatient therapies in the local hospital. And we did more than 60 outpatient visits, if you will, for doing different kinds of therapies. This is roughly around August. We did all that. There are a couple of reasons I decided to go to India. Number one was I didn't want to burden my ex-wife more because every time we had to go anywhere, she had to load up the wheelchair and take me. So I didn't want to burden her more and my family more. That was number one. And then also the costs of my health started to go up, even though the insurance company was paying most of it. The co-pays and everything was starting to add up. And the other thing which was affecting me in those 6 months was more of a mental challenge, right? Because for the 6 months, I was constantly hounded by the thoughts that, why me? Why am I suffering? Why my family is suffering? So those thoughts were really, really bothering me and making me, sad and depressed. So I wanted a holistic solution for it, doing meditation and yoga and those kind of things. So those were a couple of reasons I decided to try out this holistic facility in the state of Gujarat, which is about 200 miles from here. And I decided to go there for 2.5 months.
I think it's interesting you grew up in India, but it wasn't until after this stroke that you found yoga. Tell us about the holistic treatments you received and how yoga has been part of that, and what you learned in that process of experimenting with your health.
Growing up in India, you may think I know yoga or I may be into this Eastern holistic treatments and all that. But when I grew up, yoga was not considered cool then. And it was kind of, looked upon as an antiquated way of medicine. In fact, in India, many people, including me, believed in Western therapies and Western cutting edge technology, and yoga was overlooked. So I never did yoga then. Now it's much more accepted there as well as the West, not just helping you with the body, but also with your mind and spirit. So that was a big discovery for me to do yoga after I got stroke, and I'd never done it before.
What was it like trying yoga? What did that mean for you then?
It was an interesting experience because for me, I had done a lot of hard physical therapy and occupational therapy before. And yoga was focused on different things for your mind, different breathing techniques and meditation and energy healing and stuff like that. So it was more for the mind. I wanted to do both, right? I wanted to continue doing my physical therapy, but also supplement that with these meditation and breathing techniques and all that. So for me, that experience was interesting because I had never done it before. And again, it wasn't that I was only doing that, right? I was also doing hard physical therapy. But with yoga, as you know, the benefits are in the long run. You don't do, say, meditation today and tomorrow you are cured of everything. No, meditation takes time. Yoga, breathing techniques take time. So for me, it was very interesting. Initially, I was skeptical, but since I was doing both physical therapy as well as yoga therapy, Initially I was skeptical, but then slowly I got into the habit of doing this. I got convinced that this will help me in the long run. It did take me a while. It wasn't instantly.
Tell me about the effects of mindfulness on your healing.
Oh, absolutely. For the first 6 months or so, I was completely hounded by these thoughts. Why me? I was all in a depressive state, not depressed, but I would say depressive state. And these thoughts bothered me constantly because I was going 100 miles an hour before my stroke. And then now suddenly I was at like maybe barely doing 10 or 20. This really bothered me a lot. So I was in a constant flux of confusion in my mind. And I was angry, I was pissed off, I felt sorry for myself. So my mind was definitely not stable. I just felt the need that I need to do something to calm my mind. And that's when I started doing yoga a little bit. It helped me find some inner peace and some wellness.
The title of your book reflects this: Overcoming Resilience with Grace and Gratitude. And I love that you say that, because you even talk about how you saw the people in your life who were giving you care with grace and with gratitude, that you don't know what's going on in someone else. And you can't ever know that. And it's hard for someone to give care. And so you saw them with compassion. Tell me more about that grace that you used in your overcoming adversity.
So before my stroke, I was a very competitive person, like many out there, always trying to win, always trying to get things done the right way. And after my stroke, I have realized, and many people who know me have realized, I've become much more compassionate and empathetic after my stroke. Not that I was an asshole before, but I can definitely feel it more now, as a result of my stroke. But also, I saw a lot of compassion and empathy from a lot of my caregivers, whether in the US or whether back in India. There were people of all walks of life, different religions, different color, different castes here, and so on and so forth. But they were all very compassionate and very, very empathetic, and they helped me a lot in my recovery journey. So I saw compassion, and I had become much more compassionate due to the strokes. And it will be interesting if I ever go back to work. Will that flow in my business world? That is the key. I'm much more compassionate in my personal life, but will this compassion flow in my business world? That's something to see.
It sounds like you're healing not only from a stroke, but also from an unsustainable lifestyle.
Even though my stroke was a genetic stroke, the lifestyle I had, like many, I'm not the unique one. Many have this lifestyle, constantly on the go. Even if this genetic stroke would not have happened, maybe down the road, this lifestyle was not sustainable for me, and some other ailment would have happened, if not a stroke, maybe something to do with heart or something else. But this definitely was not a sustainable lifestyle.
You talk about willing to try anything as long as it won't kill you. And I think of the Tibetan mandala, it's kind of what's behind me in this painting, but this idea that we create something and then we blow it all away, right? That nothing is permanent. There is this temperance in life, and we all die, right? We know that. And so how did that influence your decisions in this process?
They taught me everything in life is impermanent, right? Nothing is permanent. So for me, that was definitely a lesson. For me to recover, for me to do something with my life, I had to try different things. So that's why I kept telling my caregivers that I would like to try, whether in Western or Eastern medicine, whatever treatment, whatever therapy, as far as the best knowledge they have, if that's something that does not kill me, I would like to try, because trying is in our hands. So even though everything is impermanent, you still have to try everything in your power. It may or may not work, but you have to keep trying. And so finding possibilities for me was huge. And yoga trained my mind that way. Yes, things are impermanent, things will change. You have to accept destiny, but you also have to try different things, and you have to find positivity and find possibilities in whatever you do.
What would you tell to people listening who maybe haven't suffered a stroke or something as severe, but who are leading a last minute lifestyle?
I say this in my book. People should not wait for a tragedy like me to happen, but they can start doing these things like yoga. And it doesn't have to be yoga. It could be anything, other Eastern, holistic medicine like acupuncture or whatever. But they need to try to do things now, and things like meditation or breathing exercises, and they can do it now. They don't have to wait for a tragedy, because the lifestyle we have, it's not going to change. It's only going to get worse, and now it's got worse due to the pandemic. So All we can do is focus on relaxing our mind, and we can do it now. We don't have to wait for a tragedy to happen. You can do it now.
What does it mean to be present for you?
One of the things which meditation taught me, and I do a lot of mindfulness meditation, it's present moment awareness. So you're just looking at where you are now. You're not looking in the past, you're not looking in the future. You're looking at the present. And mindfulness meditation has taught me to be constantly be aware of your present moment. And that's to me is the present moment is you are looking at things now. You're not looking in the past or future.
I see people who are very even keel. You talk about this in the book, this how we react to things is everything, and how we create space for ourselves in that reaction. Because ultimately, when we hate, it's not the other person who's hurting, we hurt ourselves. We give up our power. I think of even how some people are so even keeled that they don't allow themselves to celebrate. I think celebration is incredibly important. What are some ways that you celebrate the accomplishments that you've had in your healing journey and in life in general?
Because I'm so thankful for this second lease of life. This the stroke I had, Monica, was extremely rare. It affects like 800 people in the US, and many die and some survive. And I'm in the survivor group. I was extremely grateful and thankful that I survived. So for me, celebration means that I volunteer my time more to people. I donate wherever it's possible. I celebrate life that way. So I talk to people more. I thank people more. I volunteer my time. I donate wherever I can. So these are some of the things I do to celebrate this second lease of life.
Do you think you would have recovered as well if you didn't have access to healing in India?
I did hard physical therapy back in the States, and I continued doing that while in India, but I also supplemented that with yoga. So I think supplementing that with yoga has definitely helped me, and my recovery levels definitely wouldn't have been that positive at the end of my 2.5 month stay, because the key was supplementing it with the physical therapy. Not just one thing can work. So just doing yoga will not work. Yoga doesn't have any magic pill or any magic potion to cure you, nor does the Western medicine. You have to do both, and I'm a living proof. So I think in the US, if there was some supplementation of yoga with the cutting edge physical therapy and medical technology, that would have helped accelerate my recovery, the way I look at it. You need to have access to those things. And I wish I had access to them while doing hard physical therapy back in the US.
Was there a moment when the positivity switched on for you and you stopped being the victim where all this bad stuff was happening and instead the person who had opportunity to live?
The first 6 months, it was really troubling me. Why is this happening? I was sad. Then I slowly started to accept things, especially doing meditation. And I also started talking to a clinical psychologist. That also helped me. So talking to a psychologist and doing meditation helped me accept reality, accept life. Slowly, I started to realize that I have to accept this new normal of mine. I have to embrace what is happening to me, but I have to do it with positivity, grace, and gratitude. Because to me, self pity and complaining were not an option. You have to be positive. You have to accept whatever is going on with grace and gratitude, which is not an easy thing to do, but you develop it over time. And I think I've done that over the last 3.5 years.
How did you decide to write your book one fine day?
In 2018, when I had come to my second trip to India to be with my sister and mother, a friend had introduced me to a person who had written a book on stroke, and it's called My Stroke of Luck. So that was my initial inspiration. A stroke survivor wrote that book, and that is helping others. So that was my initial inspiration. And then, secondly, my ex wife wrote a book on her experience as a caregiver in the ICU, and the book was called ICU. And that also, to me was very powerful because it was written from a caregiver perspective. And that kind of cemented my thinking that I need to do something like that. So I decided then that I would like to write a book primarily to help others going through adversities, because I had no idea what is possible. So I wanted to share as much as possible. So around April, May of 2018, that's when I decided to write One Fine Day.
You still can't type with two hands, and
Right.
you struggle with some of the technical aspects of writing a book. So you used a ghostwriter. Tell me what that process is like working with someone who's writing your words for you.
I call it my calling. My calling, my mission was to help others because I wanted to somehow give back to society by sharing with them my tips, my lessons learned, my experiences from doing a variety of things, like whether in Eastern or Western medicine. And I wanted to share that somehow. So my calling was very strong, and I wanted to make sure that I do this. So, what was the best way to do this? I took some online classes offered by Hay House, a publisher in California. Those classes were on how to become an author. And in those classes, I learned that there's something called a ghostwriting, and that somebody will write it for you. And you're the author with your experiences and stories, and somebody will help you write it. Once I found that out, my determination, my calling became more strong. And so finally, I decided to go with a ghostwriter. And the process was this. Once I hired a ghostwriter, I would, type, obviously, I have the experiences, I have the stories. So I would type in my notes, send it to the ghostwriter. The ghostwriter would, fine tune it further, send it back to me. Then I'll fine tune it further and I'll send it to the ghostwriter. Then he'll write like an initial thing, send it back to me. Then I will review it, add, delete to it. So we went back and forth like that. That allowed me to do is that I didn't have to sit in front of a computer for a long time. Doing this, it took enough time, but it wasn't constantly like 6 hours I'm on the computer. So, going back and forth. So we did this for about a year and we wrote 11 chapters that way. It was a very, very interesting experience. So initially I thought I can just dump all my notes to this ghostwriter and let him write. But the way it worked out was, it was more of a 50-50 effort. Now we had to, it was not fair for him to understand my experiences and my story. So it was more of a 50-50 partnership, and we collaborated very well, I believe.
That's a cool story. What does the word access mean to you?
So access to me is having things available, resources available to you. In my case, I would say yoga resources when I was recovering.
Something you said that's really important in the yoga space is it doesn't have to cost money. And of course, here in California, in the Bay Area, yoga's now we're all practicing from home, right? So it actually has equalized it a little bit. There's this idea that we have to have the right clothes and the right mat. And actually, that's not true. Yoga is within. And the decision to be mindful, to be present, to understand that these things are temporary, even these conditions are temporary, right? That we can seek more through this process of being present with ourselves. And it's really powerful. So I love how you've shared that through your healing journey and noticing even these philosophies of yoga that have come in to help you create more than you even imagined maybe back in June of 2017.
And that's exactly why I wrote in the book. I've written about yoga from a practical standpoint, right? Because of the things you mentioned, there are lots of marketing about yoga, that you need to wear these fancy clothes, you have to go in a studio, blah, 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 and so on and so forth. And my message in the book is, look, yoga is a practice. And as you said, it's within you and you don't need anything else. You can do it by yourself. And I've approached, if you look at the book, I have lots of tips in there. Like, there are many people who will say, do this for so long and so on and so forth. And what I say in the book is, you do as much as you can. Don't rely on anybody else. They mean well, but only you can determine if you can do a certain exercise for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever. So I've approached this topic with a very practical viewpoint, because a lot of people get intimidated by these various things happening around yoga or any other wellness tradition.
It's an important message and an important book. So I'm glad that you wrote it and came on here to share it with us. This is Samir Bhide, the author of One Fine Day, Overcoming Adversity and Embracing the New Normal with Grace and Gratitude. And you've certainly done that. Thanks for sharing with us so much, Samir.
Well, thanks for having me on. It was a very nice chat.
Thank you for joining me for Yoga Philosophy for Everyday Living. Please learn more about our guests in the show notes and check out their awesome yoga classes. Subscribe, like, and share this podcast with a friend. And please send me your feedback. I would love to hear from you. You can learn more at sparkpluglabs.co.